We are now going to begin the third session, so would you please take your seats? All right, now our first speaker for this session, which is called Richard Parker and Sher Khan. Unfortunately, we had to, the theme is rather general and we had to fit in a paper which is not the same theme. Still, I call Monisha Bhattacharya, who is going to talk to us about learning and unlearning about the non-human world, exploring the subject and necessity in Jan Martel's Life of Pi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, sir. I'm Monisha Bhattacharya. I'm a PhD student in the Department of English at Presidency University. The title of my paper is Learning and Unlearning about the Non-Human World, Exploring the Subject and Necessity in Jan Martel's Life of Pi. Jan Martel's Life of Pi will be addressed in terms of Pi's different responses to the tiger named Richard Parker. The paper will definitely address the human non-human dualities. Apart from that, it will also try to taste and push the human subject boundaries or the horizons, its possibilities and its limitations in the connection with the present day environmental concern. Here, Pi's lifeboat journey is a metaphor for the humanity, which is definitely facing some crisis in the current scenario, and the tiger is a metaphor for non-human world, which must be incorporated in the human realm. And the apparent happy ending of the novel is basically the metaphor for the goal of the sustainable world. Now, these metaphors like the Pi's lifeboat journey and the tiger and the apparent happy ending, they blur the boundaries between the reality and the fantasy. It basically questions the realism that the novel upholds by making it a bit precarious. The paper will address how Pi's survival or existence is interconnected with the survival of the tiger, Richard Parker. And Pi considers Richard Parker as a friend and a foe. So basically the battle that Pi is fighting with the tiger is a battle he's fighting with himself as well. That's why, he said that it was not a question of him or me. It was a question of him and me. So there were 7 ways to deal with the tiger, most of which would lead to his death. But he sticks to the 7th one, that is to keep him alive. So we can understand that the human existence is ensured, by its coexistence with the non-human world. It's not that we haven't realized the intrinsic values of the non-human world. It's just that we have ignored the damage that our practices cause upon them, onto which human existence relies. Martel's Life of Pi depicts the story of Pi, a boy who finds himself stranded on a lifeboat in the vast Pacific Ocean with a Bengal tiger. Having grown up in the setting of his family's zoo in Pondicherry, Pi is faced with loss of his family, who on their way to a new start in Canada, going down with the ship along with remaining zoo animals. The central storyline located in part 2 of the novel is that of Pi's lifeboat journey, his struggle for survival and his gradual realization that the well-being of the tiger is always tied up with his own. Both Pi and the tiger eventually reach the shores of North America following an extraordinary journey of extreme physical duress and a series of events bordering mainly on the fantastic. Within the world of the novel, this structural juxtaposition places the character Pi under extreme personal duress, since the predetermined outcome relies on his transforming in 2 distinct ways. One by vastly multiplying his resourcefulness and the other by acquiring a new concept of the other, both of which turn out to be necessary to his survival. As the novel explores this subject-world dynamic, it replicates an all-important question of the era. How might humanity accommodate that which exceeds it, in theory, in thought, and in actuality? My interest in the paper ultimately is in the novel's seeming insistence, nonetheless, on the correlation at a time when the challenge of environmental crisis is precisely that of our subject limitations. Why emphasize the human perspective at all when our harms to the world are a result of our failure to see beyond our immediate needs? And what does this say about the sustainability and its human-centric modes? One might extend this to say that any subject, whether human or non-human, is subject to limitations of its own horizon, whatever the scope of the horizon. Pai observes quite aptly that we tend to romanticize wilderness, and I quote, "People think animals in the wild are happy because they are free." He remarks describing this as nonsense. However, his view that non-domestic animals live lives of compulsion and necessity characterized by high levels of fear, hunger, constant and territorial challenge, and torment by parasites overlooks, among other matters, the fact that suffering might occur in wild or domestic situations. Pai's conclusion that zoos answer survival challenges for animals as houses do for humans, based on the observation that a good zoo provides for a creature's needs, again is partially drawn. As a critic, Westling notes, zoos may well play a role in safeguarding individuals or species whose habitats are lost. But Pai takes this further, claiming that animals would choose zoos if given the choice. His position is in the end undermined not just in the face of bad zoos, but in the ironic contextualization of his own observation in the same section, that Pondicherry Zoo no longer exists. Pai's father closes the zoo when he comes unnerved by the political climate of the new India. Although some animals are rehomed, most end up interned on the ill-fated sheep. Thus, what is ultimately emphasized as far as captive animals are concerned, and still through Pai's first-person narration in the first part, is their vulnerability, like that of humans, to the realm of the human socio-political instabilities. Thus, although he attempts to do so, Pai fails to say what the non-human animals need, perhaps reflecting that what non-humans need is in an important sense unknowable to us. The sinking of the ship might denote the fall of the social world, a collapse commonly depicted in environmental crisis fiction based on society's failure to enact the changes required. For Pai, the sinking of the ship is as unbelievable as the moon catching the fire, perhaps reminding us of the difficulty of imagining a world without capitalism. Pai sees his life as entrusted to the officers of our destiny. The ship's crew, whom he remains convinced have a handle on the situation, even as the ship fills with water, leads to one side, and whom he believes will respond accordingly. But perhaps in keeping with the leadership issues of today's world, the officers instead display an irresponsible denial of the situation, unceremoniously throwing Pai into a lifeboat occupied by a hyena. Only later does Pai suspect their intention to have been to free up the lifeboat for themselves. Having dispensed with the social order, a process to which Pai's own family and many interned zoo animals are tragically sacrificed, the novel transfers Pai's journey from the domain of the ship to that of the lifeboat. Here the lifeboat, as the critic Westling remarks, becomes an elegant material pun on what Earth is for us. In depicting the lifeboat, the novel also alludes, as noted by other critics called Hucken and Tiffin, to survival narratives such as Robinson Crusoe. There are two notable aspects to Pai's changing responses at sea. One is the shift in his relationship with the tiger. The other is his growing awareness of the physical world as represented by the lifeboat and the ocean. Each of these in some way alters his perspective. At first, Pai's response to the tiger are quite understandably dramatic and extreme. Urging him to swim to the safety of the lifeboat, Pai suddenly realizes the implications. As the tiger clambers abroad, Pai jumps off into the sea, unable to imagine their mutual survival. For some time after that, he gives witness to the battle that rumbles on between the various non-human occupants of the lifeboat. The hyena, a zebra with a broken leg, an orangutan and the tiger, of course. The battle is physical since the hyena kills the zebra and the orangutan only to be killed by the tiger at last. And it is psychological since the terrified pi must use his mental resources to generate physical resources, building a raft upon which to trip some distance from the lifeboat with his resident tiger. Okay, sir. Pi battles too with his own sensibilities. As vegetarian and a pacifist, he must negotiate his horror at the task of dispatching sea life to survive. Yet each of these battles, headed by his fear of the tiger, is overshadowed by his most basic need for water. With the tiger on board, he remarks, "My life was over, that being settled, why not to do something about my parched throat?" Thus, necessity is distilled to ultimate necessity. I'll skip a bit then, as I'm running out of time. I'll come to the conclusion part. After some time at sea, he is able to dispatch a turtle, drink its blood while still warm, and make use of every atom of it as resource without flinching. If, as the critics Hugen and Tiffin said, he inhabits his own animality, this animality is also normalized as a mode of being. Thus, sentiment as a guide for living is again overruled by necessity. Pi observes, and I quote, "There were many seas. Thus, the sea roared like a tiger. The sea whispered in your ear like a friend telling you secrets. The sea clinched like a small change in your pockets," and so on. There were also all the winds, all the nights, and all the moons. In other words, located perpetually within a horizon, we cannot grasp the world in any singular sense. It brings itself anew from moment to moment, even as language categorizes its part. In Wood's terms, we encounter it in glimpses. Thus, Pi, or humanity's survival, relies on his accommodating the tiger of the non-human world, but also on his dispatching of sea life. So, what are sustainability's ethics? We must be clear, as the novel suggests, they are based on our will to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Monisha. Our next speaker is Moushumi Hajra, land number 7, The Life of Richard Parker and Life of Pi.
Hello everyone. I'm Moushumi Hajra and I'm pursuing MA from President's University. The title of my paper is Plan number 7, The Life of Richard Parker in Ian Mortall's Life of Pi. And here I begin with a quote. "I could not abandon Richard Parker. To leave him would mean to kill him. He would not survive the first night. I waited for his return. I knew that he would not be late." Unquote. A resilient Indian boy is making this above comment about a 450-pound Bengal tiger, Richard Parker, in Ian Mortall's adventurous fiction Life of Pi, to reflect upon the human-animal relationship in a regionally dislocated world, apart from the conventional one, therefore separated from the outly established order. The story challenges the historically constituted anthropomorphic perspectives and accordingly decentralizes the human stories as the fundamental medullary core in any literary genre. Dealing with various wild animals like hyena, zebra, meerkats, orangutan, tiger, the story depicts one human being, Piscine Molitor Patel, being enslaved to a tiger. The story makes the reader rethink about the hierarchical position between animality and humanity. Engaged with the spiritual, physical, and transcendental aspect, the story has become the subject of this paper, where the intention is to look for the evaluative trajectory of the tiger in the context of diverse historical position and attempts to situate it in the context of innocence and experience precipitated by William Blake's The Lamb and the Tiger. The shifted tragedy which dominated and encapsulated the lives of Piscine Molitor Patel and Richard Parker for 227 days becomes the adventurous plot of the story, where boundaries between reality and fantasy, science and religion, innocence and experience are blurred. The novel is set in a wide, spacious world with the circle sky above and a vast ocean below, where the terrestrial experiences of the two hierarchically distinct species get dismantled under the devastated oceanic natural calamity. In the very beginning, we encountered with the zoo surveillance under the human captivity of Pi's family, but towards the end, we witness a different portrayal where Pi is becoming a peripheral character serving authority to Richard Parker after implementing his plan number 7, therefore to keep him alive. This postmodern narrative proposes a reciprocal relationship between self and other and recontextualizes the human dominating space by bringing out the non-human ways of survival and wild existence. This multimodal textual and cinematic perspectives become significant to situate the novel among the distinctive ones of 21st century literature. From the very beginning, Pai's conception about animals has been different from his father. He brings himself closer to the words of the zoo in order to understand the language of animal, their bodily function. Pai's individual perception about tiger differs from society, as his father said, quote, "Tigers are very dangerous. I want you to understand that you are never under any circumstances to touch a tiger, to pet a tiger, to put your hands through the bars of a cage, even to get close to a cage." Unquote. While staying in the tiny boat, Pai begins to understand the motive and impetus of the tiger include human terms. The later story evidenced Pai and Richard Parker's interdisciplinary relationship, where the human possesses the ability to survive with an animal in the same boat. The experience of human being to captivate animal gets reversed when Pai becomes an object to the tiger as much as the tiger is to Pai. The status quo of the essential conformity to the conventional art steered their whole being. This strong bifurcation between aggression and solemnity calls up the contradictory states of human life, therefore innocence and experience. William Blake's defined ideas about experience being violent and ferocious one is expressed in the tiger. Quote, "Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?" Unquote. This fierce and outrageous countenance of the tiger symbolizes the experience that Black is formulating in Songs of Innocence and of Experience. Despite the seemingly contradictory surfaces, Blake conjoins them, saying that they are the two flip sides of the same coin. When innocence fails to make its way towards redemption, the world has to take the course of experience. Martel also channelizes the glimpse of fear and aggression through Richard Parker. Quote, "Richard Parker rose unsteadily to his feet on the tarpaulin, eyes blazing as they met mine, ears lay tied to his head. All weapons down, his head was the size and color of a live boy, with teeth and what might, his presence was overwhelming, yet equally evident was the lightsome grace of it." Unquote. Undoubtedly, it was the experience of Richard Parker that makes Pai's survival possible out of his wildly onslaught. Richard Parker kills the hand in the board, and from that Pai becomes aware of the violent discourses that the beast outburst. Pai experiments severely on Richard Parker and attempts to save himself through the verbal aggression and enmity posture in order to retain control over the animal. Among the loss, suffering, hunger, and utter alienation, Richard Parker stands as a larger threat to Pai. On the other way, Richard Parker stands as a hope to live life even on its extreme worst. By situating Richard Parker in this context, we witness several transformative multitude shades of innocence and experience, where the experience comes up as the dominant tool to return to the solemn, natural, and innocent aspects of life. Both Pai and Richard Parker got aware of their own limitation in a completely dislocated and isolated world. During the course of humanizing Richard Parker, Pai undergoes a number of beastly features. Blake's poem, like The Lamb and the Tiger, reflect how Christ can create both solemn creature like lamb as well as the violent creature like tiger. Christ is therefore the embodiment of both power, the soul creator. Richard Parker seems to be such an embodiment who possesses both the states of innocence and experience. The three religious views of Pai, therefore Islam, Hindu, and Christian, have been signified by the faith Pai keeps on Richard Parker. Hence, Blake's view has been exemplified through the notion that experience contradicts innocence but does not negate it. As Pai asked the tiger, quote, "Is not it ironic, Richard Parker? We are in hell, yet still we are afraid of immortality." Unquote. Pai's plan number 7 paves the way for their coexistence. Being the species of different category, they do not communicate through language or through any methodical way of modernity. They communicate naturally under a universal ethical base of fear and mortality. The natural instincts such as hunger, loss, betrayal connect them with a unified thread of alienation. The universal ethics of life, fear, death conjoin both human and animals into a single unity. In this respect, Blake's idea about the unity of innocence and experience is remarkable. Quote, "Every word, every letter is studied and put into its fit place. The terrific numbers are reserved for the terrific parts, the mild and the gentle, and for the mild and the gentle part, and the prosaic for the inferior parts, all are necessary to each other." In the story of displacement, migration, multiculturalism, the postmodern dichotomy between self and other is implicit, where the master, therefore Pi, is unable to sustain its governance over the slave, Richard Parker. The predetermined and over-negotiated boundaries between animal and human are driven by instinctive approach and awareness of mortality. The so-called rationality of human and the irrationality of a wild animal is placed together while Richard Parker represents a transcendental self in terms of autonomy and racial limitation. The reciprocal mode of existence for 227 days alternates the essential relationship between human nature and animal nature. The aforementioned binaries become blurred when Pi tied himself completely with the natural order of animal life, as he says to China officials, quote, "A part of me did not want Richard Parker to die at all, because if he died, I would be left alone with despair, a foe even formidable than a tiger. It's the plain truth. Without Richard Parker, I would not be alive today." Unquote. In an attempt to possess the animal, therefore, Richard Parker in the story, Michael's notion of carnivalesque is pertinent. Therefore, to situate the text in a broad-scale realistic portrayal, carnivalesque tradition always aims at dismantling the binaries between various dominant cultural forms in order to subvert the autonomy generally regarded to be sacrosanct. Bakhtin's idea of carnivalesque in revelation. The anthropological practice in the story is reflected through the hierarchical position. The language Pi used is an anthropocentric historical constitution which objectified and bifurcated animals from set standards, as Pi makes mimic communication in order to establish a relationship between them. As Bakhtin says, quote, "If one defines language in such a way that it is both reserved for what we call man, what is there to say? But if one reinstates language in a network of possibilities that do not merely encompass it, but mark it irreducibly from the inside, everything changes." Unquote. The philosophical problem occurs when the tiger, with its autonomous identity, does not reflect the humanistic criteria. There is no attachment being seen on the part of Richard Parker. The tendency to conclude things for the sake of existing laws is something Richard Parker was indifferent to. It is Pi who, towards the end of the story, utterly laments of this aggression. Life of Pi is thus privileges the historically other's story. Here, experience which is ferocious and cruel succeeds in providing lives to both the species. In this respect, Deleuze and Guattari emphasize on the part of becoming animal in their joint propagation Kafka towards the minor literature, and both of them talk about the humanized animal and animalized human, and upholds the animal's difficulty to be humanized. This finds a resemblance in the story where Pi gradually undergoes the distinct features, but Richard Parker remains a self-governed natural creature. Hence, in an intention to look to show the reversed binary, the story is left inconclusive, unstable, and uncertain from the postmodern lens. Thus, in the story, there is a continuous self-centered manipulation on the of the species, which not only affects their essential conformity to nature and culture, but gives a larger dimension of what it is to dwell in a tiny board with a human or with a tiger. The overlapped binary between to consume and to be consumed is one of the problems of earthly existence that Jan Matul promotes throughout the novel. The religious faith and experimental modern human mind are juxtaposed in order to survive. Richard Parker's appearance in the story is akin to the Old Testament God, who is cruel, horrific, fearsome, and his volatile nature helps fishing to stay alive. Richard Parker did not look back when leaving Pi forever. This suggests that the predator is spontaneous in its own way, unlike Pi. The whole story centers around the nature of Richard Parker, its symbolism, its appearance, and the larger portrayal in an aligned world. Richard Parker did not look back, and perhaps it is even more natural for an animal to leave the earthly ties behind and move forward. Thank you.
Next speaker is Namrud Adash, from Sher Khan to Avni, the politics of representation and the lived reality of tigers in India.
Good afternoon, everybody. The title of my paper is From Sher Khan to Avni, The Politics of Representation and the Lived Reality of Tigers in India. They eat without pleasure, cry without pain, grow without knowing it. They desire nothing, fear nothing, know nothing. Nicolas Malebranche's thoughtful words reverberate with René Descartes' opinion on animals, which is precisely to establish that animals are non-sentient creatures. This idea has been contested time and again, often ridiculed, and at times held outrageous. In this respect, Rudyard Kipling's talking animal characters are powerful representations to successfully discard the Cartesian view of animals. The very idea of Cartesian dictum, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, throws the animal kingdom to the lower bottom of the hierarchy owing to their non-thinking capacity. Kipling's animals are not only aware and vocal about their conditions, but are shown to inhabit a strong, functional and civilizing society. Such a representation of the animal community, however, also depicts the presence of the Hobbesian fear of killing each other. Sher Khan, the quintessential villain, is not only feared but hated by his own fellow species. He is shown repeatedly to harbor an extreme level of hatred for the humankind. Amidst the sophisticated population of animals, he is the black sheep who continuously refutes the norms laid out by the jungle fraternity. By engineering divisive ways, he lurks and preys on the vulnerable, which, however, pragmatically is his biological disposition. The field of animal studies has often been reserved strictly for the science and zoological disciplines. This is a recent phenomenon where representation of animals in literary texts and popular culture is taken seriously in academia. This this animal-related discourse, however, runs parallel to the dialogues contributed by animal rights activism. This prompts one to bring in the question of the contemporary situation of tigers and how far the representations can be held responsible for the apathy towards the same. Kipling's iconic creation of Sher Khan as a ferocious Bengal tiger has been a subject of debate since the publication of the text and has reached manifold illustrations in the recent adaptations of the Jungle Book in mass media. It is interesting to note how language plays a powerful role in the overall representation of the character of Sher Khan. The powerful rendition of the 2016 Disney animated film has helped Kipling's text re-emerge as another serious debate of analysis. Idris Elba, voicing Sher Khan, brings out a vicious creature whose face has been scarred by fire. The dialogues attributed to his characters are extremely violent and oppressive and invite critical thinking. The 1989 adaptation of Kipling's Jungle Book into a Japanese animated series was an epic phenomenon, and most of the 90s kids in Asia grew up imbibing a comprehensive idea about the animal kingdom and their natural habitat in general. For most of us, even the theme song works as a nostalgia. Jungle Jungle Pata Chala Hai has been recreated for the 2016 motion picture. Hence, it is clearly evident how popular culture shapes the thinking of a growing human. The motion picture, The Jungle Book, failed to show us why there was an inherent rage within Sher Khan against the human civilization. The cinema portrayed Sher Khan as a bloodthirsty man-eater whose purpose of life is to kill the man-cub as a revenge for the scar he received. But nobody talks about the validity of this absolute hatred. Sher Khan has undoubtedly got a taste of the destructive nature of human. His repeated warnings against the danger of the red flower come from his own subjective victimhood. Netflix did what Disney failed to convey. In 2018, Netflix came up with a darker version of the same story but with interesting alterations. Here, for a change, Mowgli is shown interacting with humans. Apart from a woman singing him lullaby, the presence of a cruel hunter who desires Sher Khan's scalp is a curious turn in the tale. For the first time, there is a clear depiction of humans as imminent threat to the world of animals. This Netflix version called Mowgli is revised and re-equipped with modern-day concerns of deforestation, vanishing jungles. The jungle is changing and man is taking more of it. This could be a departure point if the key elements could be coupled with real concern for vanishing tigers as well. But this also failed to conceive Sher Khan as anything more than a hideous villain. Moreover, the solution offered in the cinema is an efficient teaming up of humans with animals to get rid of the tiger as a common enemy. This ruthless eviction of Sher Khan can be reflected on the recent killing of Avni the tigress. For Indian viewers who would find no difference in the depiction and reality of the existence of tigers as man-eaters or destroyers of cattle. Eviction and subsequent extinction is the only possible solution. Hence, from Sher Khan to Avni, the tiger's fate is sealed. November 2018 saw an uproar in wildlife activism when Avni was killed by a team of Foreign Department officials and civilian hunter Asghar Ali. Sarita Subramaniam of the Earth Brigade Foundation, who was actively involved in the protests against the killing of Avni, called it a state-sponsored fake encounter. She said, and I quote, "The Maharashtra government, the NGO responsible for camera footage, and the principal chief conservator of forests have not only shown disregard to the court's judgment, but also tampered with evidence. If they could shoot the tigress from such a close distance, they could have easily tranquilized her. This whole argument of self-defense is a farce." Another statement issued by Meet Asher, Emergency Response Coordinator with PETA, said, and I quote, "Avni was killed illegally, satisfying a hunter's lust for blood. Plain and simple, impossible contempt of court, and in apparent violation of the Wildlife Protection Act and the guidelines of the National Tiger Conservation Authority. She may not have died instantly, but slowly, through pain and blood loss, and likely in front of a now orphaned and vulnerable cubs. In the recent wave of nationalism, the country has seen incessant bloodshed for the protection of one particular animal, yet the real conditions of the cows in India are as terrible. Similarly, in a land where the tiger holds the status of the national animal, while in reality it has no reliable source of food or shelter and is constantly being pushed towards extinction, the propaganda of the Save Tiger campaigns becomes a farce. Thank you.
The next speaker is Pratik Mahawat. Again, Sher Khan, an individual with multiple opinions.
Yeah, is it visible? Is it visible to everyone? Good afternoon to all, and hello and welcome to the 2-day student seminar on tiger organized by Ramakrishna Mission Vidya Mandira, Belur. And I am immensely thankful to the organizers because such a platform is indeed very much necessary for the task like these, the interdisciplinary studies. So, at the very outset, I would like to quote one very magnificent person in the field of wildlife. Obviously, it is within the quotation that most of us would agree that a tiger is one of the world's most beautiful creatures. Sadly, in the wild, it is threatened with extinction. But is a tiger in a cage truly a tiger? I doubt it. Let us have the effect first of all. But is a tiger in the cage truly a tiger? I doubt it. To see the true essence and the beauty of a tiger, you have to see it in the wild. And that is what we are going to deal in this paper. I think I will be able to take all of us to our childhood, and here I present the very much debated character who is actually widely known to be an antagonist. Representation of Sher Khan, an individual with multiple appeals. As we know, Sher Khan appears in the first of the Mowgli stories called Mowgli's Brothers in the Jungle Book. Actually, the total entire edition is known as the Jungle Books, comprising 2 volumes of Kipling's works, the Jungle Book written in 1894 and the second Jungle Book written in 1895. Well, right from the beginning, as he appears before us, we are very much habituated to speculate him as a typical antagonist, a rival of Mowgli, with all sorts of sinister approaches on his physique and face. But are Sher Khan's word and the actions that we use to analyze from different points of view really are the actions of an antagonist? There is a little bit doubt regarding this because, as we know, as Kipling presented him in the Jungle Book, this is a common, commonly presented view of a tiger as an antagonist or as a perfect villain. But it is very interesting to note that several production houses, from time and again, since 1937 to 2018, just a year ago, eager to display the Jungle Book in different versions, and obviously every ethic of adaptations says that new kinds of interpolations can be done in terms of representing the character. So I think there is time for us to reconsider Sher Khan's character is not only as an antagonist but a purely wild tiger with all sorts of feline masculinities and grace, as we can find out him. As you can see, I have presented a slide at a glance which reveals Sher Khan's certain traits that we can find in his characters. 4 of the representations are made here. Well, I think the most close one to the Kipling's work is The Adventures of Mowgli, a Russian adaptation of the Jungle Book, which was primarily fragmented in 5 parts, but later on in 1973 it was combined and appeared on the screen, entitled as Adventures of Mowgli, directed by Roman Davidov. As you can see in the English version, Scott McLean presented the Sher Khan's voice, and in the main Russian version, the voice was lent by A. Papanov. Now, why I am saying this is bearing the very much of the exactitude with Kipling's work. I am taking out some of the excerpts because maybe I may run out of the time, because in a stipulated frame, it is almost a little bit of difficult to discover the mindscape of a character, because a tiger, when we used to see a tiger, we should remember that we are not only watching or speculating a tiger, we are observing a character, because as we all of us are acquainted with the fact that Sher Khan, along with all other Kipling's rendition of animal character, is an anthropomorphic character. Certain human traits are implemented on his character. So, close to the textual version of the is a Russian adaptation of Mowgli stories, as you can see here on the screen. Here, Sher Khan's persona finds its expression to the voice of Scott McLean and A. Papanov, and perhaps this is the large proportion of exactness. Here, Sher Khan feels the guts to assert, "It is I, Sher Khan, who speaks." As you can find, I have actually put a screenshot from the Russian version with the English subtitle. And in his first appearance during an arrogant conversation with Raksha, the mother wolf, who, like all other characters of Kipling, is differentiated in different disparate versions. When it comes to the wolf's pact and snatch away the newly found infant, considering him as his property, mere property. To Sher Khan, Mowgli is a mere property. And the tiger's tone must be domineering in its appearance, as we all know. In fact, when we speculate a tiger, apart from its very wild existence, the real existence, the transliterated versions are really a blissful appearance and proper justice, aesthetical justice to our national animal. And to be very frank, Kipling had never failed to intonate his supreme feline creature with the tone of such mighty autocrat. Now, why I am saying mighty autocrat, that will be revealed in the next slides. And he entirely careless of everything. Widely, he does not care for the law of the jungle. Quite interestingly, an interrogation arises in our mind that why on earth the law of the jungle, which renders the message to keep the peace with the lords of the jungle, the tiger, the panther, the bear, such creatures, the lord, you can see the at the top of the hierarchy, tiger is presented. So why the lord himself is disobeying the law of the jungle? Is really a kind of disobedience in the true sense of the term? Well, let us have a look. Sher Khan's personality tends him to act in accordance with his own will. Such kind of persona is perfectly very much suitable to him. So far as the depiction of the scenes is concerned, Davidov's version of Mowgli's stories represents themselves to be in the mold of perfect ancient wilderness. Yeah, ancient wilderness I mentioned, that is because of this is where the entire jungle fears the tiger, and the tiger takes pride in his supreme being, in his absolutism. We know regarding from the recent activities that we human beings are performing from time to time, man is the most unwelcome creature in the jungle, and in everyone's eye, he is the true destroyer of nature. This view is more important and more relevant, as I have really recently stated. The acceptance of Mowgli in the midst of the jungle dwellers is an odd phenomenon, and except the wolf parents, the wolf pack, Bagheera, the melanistic leopard, who is very much endearing character to us, Balu, the sleepy brown bear, and Ka, the python. It is Sher Khan who really protested against Mowgli's upbringing among the wolf pack and the jungle, as you can see. And obviously, there was a golden jackal called Tabaki, Sher Khan's sidekick, who protested Mowgli's inclusion in the pack. And cruel, intelligent, and cunning, Sher Khan is fearless of most of the things. We shall be discovering and rediscovering his characters. Now, just skipping over some of the slides. Yeah, this is the next one, the Jungle Book Disney animated version. In fact, this is the first animated series of the Jungle Book. The first film version was made in 1937. It was entitled as The Elephant Boy. And this is the first animated version, and the last one that was produced by Walt Disney himself in 1967 and directed by Wolfgang Reitherman. As you can see, George Sanders played the voice of Sher Khan, but I won't invest much of my time to elaborate this session. You can find it out on the slide that I have made, that it is merely a childhood classic where Sher Khan upholds the traditional view that is much talked of. But let us skip forward a little bit and rediscover him in the mold of the perfect wilderness, as I have said in describing Davidov's version, the Russian animated version of the Jungle Book. He is a pure wild tiger after all, and relating the fictional details with that of the facts would be an interesting one to notice. Let us have a look. Yeah. You can see the key traits of Sher Khan's character here, and at the last point I have mentioned the replica of Ravana at the end of the battle. In episode number 38 we can see that Mowgli stabbed him and killed Sher Khan, but when we was discussing the matter that he is the breaker of the jungle laws, let us have, before concluding this speech, I would like to show you what sort of self-employer of jungle law he was. Just have a look of his mighty autocratic tone of mighty autocracy, and then we will skip over some of the slides.
Sher Khan!
Is it audible to everyone?
It's a jungle law, man cub. Who are you to say whether it's good or bad? A man cub obeys the laws of the jungle much better than some like me. The great Sher Khan would prey on humans, and that's breaking the law. Don't you remember?
Not this one.
The first law of all. When you're hungry, you eat. I was hungry an hour ago, but then I had a feast. Now there's one less human. I need a drink of water.
Now there is one less human. Such a tone of autocracy there is. And now let us have a look at several moments that Fumio Kurokawa, the director of the Japanese anime version, displayed. There are some of the wounds that a tiger could receive, and it is very much display of the reality that today we are witnessing. You can see Sher Khan is stabbed at his heart, and such an extension, just look at the face. He is not at all fearless. He has some kind of fear. He is a pyrophobe, as we know, very much aware and very much afraid of the red flower, the fire, the very much recognized innovation of human beings. Also, he was afraid of the gunshots, the sound of the gunshots. And this is one of the screenshots that I have collected from episode number 14, The Cold Bed. And this one, obviously, two of the comparative studies of Sher Khan, the Jungle Book Disney animated version and the Legend of the Jungle, which is the Netflix version, that would be talked later on by one of my fellow presenters, and that would be detailed, that will have a detailed kind of discussion, detailed kind of elucidation. And are you familiar with this? Here are two comparative close anime adaptations. One is obviously the 1989 Japanese adaptation, and another is Simba the King Lion, 1995, which was telecasted up to 2001, if my memory is working properly. And here, Italian TV producer Orlando Corati has represented Sher Khan, and such is his extension. Sher Khan, actually, he is not dead. He is textually dead, but symbolically such kind of sufferings are going on, and this is the eternal allegory. As you can see, Don Randall has represented the tiger in the mold of post-mutiny allegory, and in the indentation you can clearly link the 1857 situation when India was going through under the constant battle against the British ones. And here, obviously, the martyr, theme of martyrdom is very much important, because he died with no intention. He wanted to protect the jungle from the man, from the human, what can I say, human invader in terms of Mowgli. And here is Ustad, who was an alleged man-eater, sent in captivity on 8th May 2015. The sacrificer, of course, he is not dead, still alive very much, and could have been relocated to wild. And here is the sacrificer and the martyr Avni, who recently stole the heart of all of us in terms of a new value of conservation and wildlife ethics. So thank you so much for representing such a wonderful platform and paying a careful attention to this presentation.
Thank you, Sudip. Our next speaker is Iron Dawn, Disney versus Netflix, the adaptation of Sher Khan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arun Don, and the paper which I am going to present is titled Disney vs. Netflix, the adaptation of Sher Khan. So in 2016, Disney's the remake of 1967 version, The Jungle Book. Hello? Sorry. So in 2016, the remake of the 1967 version, The Jungle Book, released, and in 2018 also, Andy Serkis' Mowgli Legend of the Jungle also released, which was produced by Netflix. Warner Bros. Streamed on Netflix. So, and these two movies had a completely different tone, although they were adapted from the same short story collection by Rudyard Kipling. So the matter of my paper is the adaptation of the character of Sher Khan in both the movies, the 2016 version and 2018 version, and the paper further explores which adaptation of the character is more close to the original text. So published in 1894, Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book proved to be a hit with young and old alike. The Jungle Book, stories of a human boy named Mowgli raised by animals in the wild, is made for riveting reading. In these stories, the animals proved to be both Mowgli's allies and adversaries. Baloo the bear, Bagheera the panther, and Sher Khan the tiger have all become famous characters. They even appeared in Kipling's sequel, The Second Jungle Book, which debuted in 1895. Now, one of the most crucial reasons why Mowgli and his adventures became intrinsically involved with our childhood is because of the numerous adaptations of this beloved short story collection, the most timeless being Walt Disney's The Jungle Book, 1967. Now, Disney's adaptation surely had made the stories of Mowgli immortal, but it can't be denied that most of these adaptations tend to avoid the dark themes and the complexity of the characters which Kipling emphasized upon through his stories. According to Robert B. Sherman and Richard M. Sherman, the American songwriter duo, for the 1967 film, Walt Disney, the co-founder of the Walt Disney Company, told them things like, "Don't be too heavy and don't be like the original book." Walt Disney wanted to give the film a Disney quality, which led to the lively characters and enjoyable songs to sing along to. In 2016, Walt Disney's Classics was remade by Jon Favreau, whose technical brilliance and stellar performance from the star cast left us speechless. Though the 2016 version was more close to the text than the 1967 one, it left enough room for another movie to be made, because Disney never explored the grim expressions of their stories. When Netflix's Mowgli Legend of the Jungle's trailer released, it was like a breath of fresh air amongst all these adaptations. So, during an interview, Andy Serkis, the director of Mowgli Legend of the Jungle, said, "We were going back to the source material. I knew exactly the tone of the story I wanted to tell, coming from the tone of the book. So the previous movie version didn't really bother me." So, I would like to show how the treatment in both the movies is different by different directors. If we see the color correction in both the movies, like here you see in the above picture is a screenshot from the Netflix version. So the above screenshot is from the Netflix version and the below one is from the Disney version. So you can see from the color version that the two are totally had a different tone. So now I am going to compare the two movies, the characterization of Sher Khan in both the movies, and how much it is in sync with the character of the book. So the basic physical trait of Sher Khan is his limping. He has been lame in one foot from his birth, says Raksha the mother wolf in the story Mowgli's Brothers. The physical disability is important because this acts as an irony with his name. His name Sher Khan means majestic, but because of this physical disability, he is mocked by animals inferior to him, and Sher Khan is also sometimes afraid of animals inferior to him, like Tabakui, the jackal. I would like to quote a portion from Mowgli's Brothers from the Jungle Book, which says, "Even the tiger runs and hides when little Tabakui goes mad. For madness is the most disgraceful thing that can overtake a wild creature. We call it hydrophobia, but they call it diwani, the madness and run." So in this limping, the Disney hasn't put much focus upon this trait, physical trait. However, Netflix has put a great deal of emphasis upon this. I'd like to show you two videos which will furthermore strengthen my comment.
strange oath.
Carefully notice that the limping is not there in the Disney movie. This clip. This is the entry of Shere Khan.
I almost think it was some kind of
Legs.
mad cub.
Mowgli belongs to my pack, General. Mowgli?
They've given it a name. What was it? We came to adopt man into the jungle.
He's just a cub.
Does my face not remind you of what a grown man can do? If you're hunting around for a few years and everyone forgets how the law works.
So this was from the Disney version. Now, this is the entry of Shere Khan in the Netflix movie. Carefully observe the legs.
I killed them. He's the one to come looking for him.
This is not your concern, Shere
The
Khan.
cub is mine. I've already tasted its mother's blood.
So this was the difference which I wanted to point out. Now the second thing which shows that Netflix has tried to keep the characters in sync with the text is by including the character Tabaqui, the jackal. You can see here, Tabaqui. In Disney's Jungle Book 2016, Shere Khan has no one to his company, but in Netflix's version, Tabaqui is shown as his so-called companion. The inclusion of Tabaqui in the movie does more justice to the text. Shere Khan, who trusts Tabaqui the most, is betrayed by him in the end. This thing made Shere Khan same to Mowgli because Mowgli was also betrayed by his wolf brothers. As we witness the development of the character Mowgli, we notice that he is similar to Shere Khan. Mowgli becomes an outcast just like the ancestors of Shere Khan, the first of the tigers, became in the story How Fear Came in the second Jungle Book. Shere Khan is feared by all, and as Mowgli grows up, he is also feared by the jungle. So the stories in the book exhibits the politics of Shere Khan more than his physical strength. Don Randall says that as the rebels of Sepoys of 1857 looked to Bahadur Shah for leadership, so during the troubled period of interregnum within the Seoni pack, restless young wolves rally around Shere Khan and turn against Mowgli. Just as the British in the 1858 put an end to the symbolic kingship of Bahadur Shah, so Mowgli puts an end to the lame tiger's pretensions to the power. The story of Mowgli's ultimate victorious struggle against Shere Khan thus mirrors key features of mutiny history and of the British reconstitution of that history, recapitulating a British triumph in the midst of treachery and adversity. The politics of Shere Khan is seen a bit in Disney's The Jungle Book 2016 when Shere Khan is talking with the wolf kids or when he misleads Mowgli into throwing the fire. But Shere Khan's politics is more visible in Andy Serkis's adaptation. Here Shere Khan does not randomly attack Mowgli as in the Disney version, but observes him and when he strikes hard. Another thing which grabs attention is the reason for killing Shere Khan, which is different in both the movies. In the book, Mowgli is being constantly nagged by Bagheera that he needs to kill Shere Khan. I would like to read out a portion from the story Mowgli's Brothers. It was one very warm day that a new notion came to Bagheera, born of something that he had heard. Perhaps Ikki the porcupine had told him, but he said to Mowgli, when they were deep in the jungle, as the boy lay with his head on Bagheera's beautiful black skin, little brother, how often have I told thee that Shere Khan is the enemy? As many times as there are nuts on that palm, said Mowgli, who naturally could not count. What of it? I am sleepy, Bagheera, and Shere Khan is all long tail and loud talk, like Mao, the peacock. This shows that Mowgli is treated as a weapon to kill Khan. They know it's a man who can kill the tiger, and at the end, the reason for killing Shere Khan in the book is shown as the promise which he makes to his wolf mother. This motive is changed in both the movies. Netflix even introduces an albino, Hood, a character not present in the stories, whose death becomes the motive of revenge for Mowgli. In Disney version, the reason for killing Shere Khan is the death of Akela. Another character trait of Shere Khan which was missing in the films is the attacking technique of Shere Khan. In the stories, he always attacks from the back because he can't look in the eyes of man, as we see in the How Fear Came in the story, where he was where man is an embodiment of fear, and when he first killed man, then only in one night he can look into the eyes of man, and on the other nights he attacks from the back. But however, in the movies we see a Sher Khan looking into the eyes of his prey and hunting, whether it's a man or an animal, in both the movies, except in the Disney version when Sher Khan attacks Mowgli from the back in one scene. The death of Sher Khan is portrayed differently in the movies. In the Disney version, he is killed by Mowgli with the help of fire or the red flower, as the animals say. In the book, Sher Khan is killed near the man village by a stampede of buffaloes and cows planned by Mowgli. I think that using the setting of the village and the stampede scene would have sent a better message to the audience, because killing the so-called antagonist by burning half of the forest promotes nothing but the destruction of nature. And it was also not in the book. In the book, there was the setting of a village, and in the stampede scene, not burning of the forest. However, Netflix adapts the killing of Sher Khan beautifully. It uses the setting of the village and the character of the hunter, which makes the fighting scene look real and also in sync with and somehow in sync with the text. The most striking feature which I found absent in Disney and present in the Netflix version is the portrayal of Sher Khan not as a villain but an animal with flaws. Sher Khan is shown as a being that can have flaws and can make mistakes which humanize the character. In the end, Mowgli says in the movie, Netflix version, "Sleep now, Sher Khan, be angry no more." I'd like to show the clip. So the Netflix version raises certain questions. Is the tiger really wrong? Man is forbidden in the jungle. Sher Khan knows that infiltration of man will bring nothing but destruction. So it is evident that he is against Mowgli. He is not wrong from his point of view. Another view which can be considered as the Sher Khan's reason of wanting Mowgli dead is that he wants to remain the most powerful being in the jungle. He is intelligent enough to realize that Mowgli is more powerful than him. But then one may say that Mowgli goes to the village. So why does he come to kill Mowgli? Two reasons can be provided. One, Mowgli's father has scarred Khan with red flower, that is fire. He is blind in one eye. So he wants to kill Mowgli and taste revenge. Secondly, he is addicted to the scent of blood. The scent of blood maddens him. This addiction to the scent of blood is in the book and is also shown in Netflix's Mowgli Legend of the Jungle. In the scene Cold Layers, where he just scratches his arm and then says, "I just like the taste of your blood." And then he is saved by Ka, the cat of Mowgli. So now the reasons, revenge and addiction, are they not human flaws? So I would like to conclude by saying that what I felt after watching the movies is that Andy Serkis has involved more stories from the book than Jon Favreau. The story Tiger Tiger is not even present in Disney's The Jungle Book 2016 version. Andy Serkis has humanized the character of Sher Khan. Sher Khan, like any other being in a competitive world, possesses the desire to be at the top of hierarchy, is gullible to addiction, and he may want anything but the destruction of his home, the jungle. Is Sher Khan a villain or is he a victim? That's for us to decide. But one thing which Andy Serkis makes clear through his movie is that Sher Khan is a character who, just like any other being in the universe, is flawed and make mistakes that are human. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker of the day is Meghomala Ghosh. Her paper has a very long title to it, Rediscovering the Tiger as a Part of Colonial and Post-Colonial Structures and Synergies, and Analysis of Man-Eaters of Kumaon by Jim Corbett, Naturalist on the Prowl by E.H. Aitken, and Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright by Rustin Bond.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Meghamala Ghosh and I'm from Presidency University and I'm pretty much the odd one out in this session. But be rest assured my paper is about tigers. So the title of my paper is Rediscovering the Tiger as a Part of Colonial and Post-Colonial Structures and Synergies, an Analysis of Man-Eaters of Kumaun by Jim Corbett, A Naturalist on the Prowl by E.H. Aitken, and Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright by Ruskin Bond. The phrases as cruel as a tiger and as bloodthirsty as a tiger have put a label on the tiger through generations as being a significantly idiomatic expression of fictional evil characters. However, authors who are not naturalists have completely misread an animal that was the inspiration behind the imagination and the realities that have been presented before us through the eyes of two colonial authors who have been privileged enough to have had the opportunity to not only be the observers of the tiger in its natural habitat, but also to notice how humans and their interactions with nature are very anthropomorphic in case of Aitken and sympathetic and superior in case of Corbett. Bond, on the other hand, writes out of fascination and respect for the tiger. Corbett says that, and I quote, "Sights have been seen which would have caused a stone to weep. I have not seen a case where a tiger has been deliberately cruel or where it has been bloodthirsty to the extent that it has killed without provocation more than it has needed to satisfy its hunger or that of its cubs." Corbett writes a story about the man-eater of Champawat in lucid language, but his narrative is not only a rich account of a naturalist's take on a man-eating tigress, but also a very colonial narrative. Corbett is a torn man, peering between high praises of his friend Eddie Knowles as, and I quote, "a sportsman par excellence and the possessor of an inexhaustible fund of shikari arms. A rifle was without equal in accuracy and striking power, while one of his brothers was the best gunshot in India. Another brother was the best tennis player in the Indian army," close quotes. And the simultaneous paranoia and fear that grip him as he clearly points out how the tragic death of Berthold had rattled him. It was not only Berthold's death that made the naturalist behave like the tiger's prey, but also the fact that Berthold lay buried in an obscure grave in Haldwani. He laments how such a deeply loved and respected man could be treated in such a way. But this lamentation extends to the whole of the British in India and marks the colonial temperament that cannot understand and yet understands that, like the man-eater that roams about regally in his territory but has to be ultimately killed, the British too will need to leave the territory they consider theirs. In the Champawat Man-Eater, Corbett has highlighted that the British and their relationship with nature is very different from the superstition and revenge-driven relationship that the Indians had with nature at that time. I quote, "Let us hack it to bits. I could not believe my ears when I heard hack it to bits, and yet I had heard right. The shout was being repeated," is an expression of Corbett's superiority over barbaric Indians. His scientific analysis of the reason of the tigress becoming a man-eater, the loss of canines due to earlier gunshots, and the gross generalization of the villagers dismissing the benefit of doubt to the animal and proclaiming it to be a shaitan, is an acute expression of two sides of the tale without which the narrative would not survive. The synergy of the perspectives of the narrators and the white man are what make the narrative possible and the ebbing colonialism a reality. I quote, "The tiger is the very soul of India, and when the last tiger goes, so will the soul of the country," is what Ramo's grandfather proclaims regarding the last tiger of the jungle, which is washed away after being presumed dead by the villagers in Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright by Ruskin Bond. Bond takes up the story from the point of view of the tiger in the third-person narrative at the beginning, and his views are clearly the views of a man who condemns the sport of hunting and once again reiterates the statement that Corbett makes regarding how tigers have been stereotyped and discriminated against, pointing towards how anthropomorphic the texts actually are. For a man with a gun cannot resist letting it off, even if it is only at a rabbit or at another man. Is Bond's attempt at showcasing that there are clearly significant differences between animals and humans. One hunts for food, the other for trophies. Ruskin Bond writes the story from the point of view of the tiger first, as the animal traverses through the forest, observing the young boys, while remaining discreet himself. I quote, "He was feeling quite hot," is a statement that humanizes the tiger and individualizes him, granting him almost the dignity of a human who feels and expresses it through speech and other means. This sentence is purely an embodiment of human sentiment in an animal known for its cruelty. The other segment of the story concentrates on the children, their father and their grandfather, as he tells stories about man-eaters. Here the grandfather once again reiterates the fact that the tiger is considered closer to a human than an animal, as he instructs his grandson to call the tiger either uncle or Maharaja. In fact, the tiger is considered worthy of respect by the grandfather, who is the only person who laments the loss of the tiger once it is washed away. This is an indication of changing ideologies from Corbett, whose colonial mentality and superior status as a colonizer made him criticize native beliefs to showcase how important the British were to the Indians, to Bond's amiable mentions of two stories which don't show the superstitious nature of Indian thoughts but instead showcase how fascinating this Indianness is that can lend magic to the narrative instead. Aitken's A Nationalist on the Prowl is an account of Victorian colonial India where confusions and paradoxes reign supreme, especially where the British and native thoughts intertwine and reflect off each other. The other state of confusion and simultaneous enchantment, as in, I quote, "For in spirit I am a Buddhist," points to the influence of an alien religion on a British colonizer living in India as a naturalist. Immediately after, the author writes that one must, and I quote once again, "set aside one day in the week for a Sabbath of peace and goodwill that brings to attention the ingrained Christian perspective and fights with the new Buddhist ideology that Aitken is drawn towards. It is the fight between Oriental enchantment and Western Weberian disenchantment, as well as the author goes out to collect specimens to fulfill his role as a naturalist and a scientist, but still cannot resist adding that one must set a watch upon yourself lest you degenerate into a collector and cease to be a naturalist." The way Aitken refers to an Indian as a Brahmin gentleman and at the same time says that men laugh where angels weep, that the worshippers of these things are looking downwards, not upwards, and that man goes as his face is turned, indicates just how the colonizer has been affected by India and how he keeps on trying to retain his superiority through any means possible. I quote, "Among the things that own not man's dominion are one or two, some say three, tigers," is the sentence that is a literal manifestation of the colonizer's state of mind, where the tiger is a symbol of India. The colonizers know that they might have India trapped under them to exploit and to rule, but they'll never be able to own the place. It is a persisting dilemma to Aitken when he says that, I quote, "Those butterflies that one sees traveling from one island to another in the Bombay harbor, in the spirit of Columbus, and is their arrival a happy accident? I cannot tell." Here, Aitken finds himself and other fellow colonizers to be the butterflies that have flitted into India to find greener pastures and now go through the enchantment and simultaneous disenchantment that keeps them from embracing India in its entirety. Aitken has doubts about this happy accident because his writings show parallels and opposites that could be the beginning of an identity crisis for the colonizers. Corbett is no longer in doubt because he is in the last stages of this happy accident and is certain of the inability of the colonizer to have been able to integrate themselves into a culture that they always wanted to own. Bond let goes of his superiority and embraces India, and thus writes in a way that gives a voice to not only the tiger, but also the tribal village communities and their superstitions and their stories. The way Bond highlights their oral traditions and superstitions doesn't prove them inferior to the white man, but instead provides the Indian charm to the Indian symbol of the tiger. Thank you for patiently hearing my paper.
Now, if there are any questions to the speakers, any questions? No? None? Well, I have a question to all those who are talking about Sher Khan. Well, my reading of Kipling seems to point to the fact that Sher Khan was a manager. So that brings us to Meghwala's paper, where a manager is, is defined by Corbett in certain terms. So those who are discussing Sher Khan, do you agree with this? Is Sher Khan a manager? And does it mean that all tigers that are negatively portrayed are managers, and being a manager is a bad thing?
That's the driving and survival instinct they have. They know what big cats do.
No. Do big cats eat humans?
Basically what happens is that the tiger isn't born a manager. The tiger or tiger is born a manager.
That's what Corbett says.
Basically what happens is that usually at the time Corbett wrote his book, there were several famines across India and several people had died in these famines, and the condition was so poor that people were not being able to light the fires to burn the bodies.
And so these were half-burnt bodies that were...
That were put into the ravines and thrown into the ravines. And what happened was that these tigers could go there, tigers, leopards as well. And we can, as Corbett has also written about another book titled The Leopard of Rudraprayag. So these left.
But you see, where Corbett is concerned, there is the bachelor of Hawalgar that he kills. Now this tiger is completely innocent. And then he tries to kill the temple tiger,
Yes.
which he fails. None of these tigers, neither of these two tigers, either the bachelor of Hawalgar or the temple tiger had attacked humans.
But he kills them because it is just like I said in my paper that a man with a gun can shoot off at anything, whether it be a rabbit or any other man. It's an instinct that human beings have ingrained in themselves as well.
Would you say that Corbett is a trophy hunter, because Corbett at other points of time in his life, what he did is that he used to organize these shoots, tiger shoots, very famously for Maharajas. He did so for Lord Linlithgow, who was the viceroy. And these tiger shoots were terrible things where animals were simply, lines of beaters brought the animals to elephants, to hunters on elephants and machans, and it was simply, just aim and shoot kind of thing. So Corbett probably was not as holy as he pretended to be. Would you agree?
Actually, I would like to add something. Tigers, the idea that they used to kill tigers to protect human beings is actually not that true, because snakes caused more deaths than man-eating tigers did in those days.
You see, in that case, for instance, Corbett had this superstition that he would not be successful in hunting a tiger until he had killed a snake first. And in several of the tales, I think the Thak man-eater particularly, he first kills a cobra. He is constantly failing at it, and then he kills a cobra, and then he says, "I'm going to be successful."
So he was also superstitious, but he says that the Indians are superstitious, and he basically proves himself to be superior to them in terms of superstition and science. But actually, he himself is a superstitious human being as well. So that's a very colorful.
For instance, if you were to read Corbett, you would find that he is open to colonial, discourse. That is, post-colonialists would simply take him apart, because he talks about the Indian as somebody who is very simple and loyal, and particularly of the hill people as being simple and loyal. And the hill people are so simple and loyal, while people from the plains tend to be more complicated. This kind of stereotyping is, very common to you find it all across Corbett. And then, of course, there is something else to which I would like to draw your attention. There is this book about people who stayed on, and there one of the Englishmen who stayed on, a retired British Army colonel, he alleges the fact that Corbett did not write the stories at all; his sister did. Because he says that I knew Corbett, and it was not possible for Corbett. Corbett was, very reserved, and he was not given to writing. So that's again another
aspect of the fact.
Sir, you said that is Sher Khan a man-eater or not? But sir, in the tales, Sher Khan is not branded as a man-eater. I think he is branded as a cattle killer.
No, but he's going to. His aim is to eat the man cub.
No. He wants to kill the man. Eat the man cub. And sir, he kills for pleasure. Because he is physically deformed, so he can't prey upon human beings.
That is one of the criteria. The most important criterion that was given.
That was an inherent rage for the revenge that he wanted to kill the man cub, because he received a scar, lifetime scar from the fire.
Which is why I was talking about Rigola's paper, because you see in Corbett says that this is the basic criterion for a tiger to become a man-eater, is that if this tiger is injured and cannot hunt down animals which it's supposed to, which are its natural food, because of some kind of an injury. Now this could be an old bullet injury. Maybe if tigers become too old, lost its teeth, and so on and so forth. So that is the association. Okay, so thank you very much. Now we move on.
One last question. I have one question to all my fellow presenters. As you represented that the main revenge motive that was working on Mowgli's mind in order to kill Shere Khan. In Disney version, it was the revenge motive in order to death of Akela.
He's a culminating point. Then he was.
And you mentioned that in 2018 Netflix version, it was the death of Book, but as we can find out in the movie,
Yes, you're right. It was the character of Albino. When he saw it in the hunter's room that the Albino's character is dead, so yes, I was wrong.
Just to one point. Regarding the stuffed version of the albino wolf, we may arrive at the conclusion that it was killed by the hunter, the trophy hunter. So what is the significance of the revenge motive to kill Shere Khan behind this?
No, you see, he wants to kill Shere Khan because if you read the text very carefully, then he makes a promise to his mother that he will bring his hide and then he will return to the where he belongs. He believes that he belongs to the wolf pack, right? And then he was his friend, so he wants to kill the hunter too. So there are two motives here. You have rightly pointed out. So he also, you see in the end, he calls the hathi.
The broken.
Yes, because hunter has broken it. It is adapted. He's broken it, so he calls the elephant. That's your hunter. He's not bothered with that. He's about to kill him because so that he takes the revenge of his friend. But his main motive is to kill Shere Khan. So I think you can arrive at that conclusion.
So thank you very much indeed. And as he was pointing out the matter of revenge motive, in different versions it was projected differently. In the Fumio Furukawa's version, we can see that. Did you watch the slide where a wolf was delivering a nasty blow on his right thigh? Yeah, that was the father wolf who was named as Alexander and who was affectionately, I could have mentioned this but I was running out of time, so sorry for that, who was affectionately named as Moti. And in that very version, whose Hindi version brings us our nostalgia, brings forth the nostalgia in front of us, there Shere Khan actually killed Alexander. And in that version, Fumio Furukawa and the scriptwriter, three of the legendary scriptwriters were there. They had manipulated the method that the tiger had killed the father, and therefore the Grey brothers, Akru and Sura, along with Mowgli, being backed up by Mowgli, three of them, Alexander's son, were in fact desired to bring down the tiger at their
Avenge the death of
avenge the death of his father. So in different versions, different motives were actually hinted, projected. Thank you so much.
Yes, one last question to Pratik. Why is Hathi called Colonel Hathi? That's all.
As we may have a careful look at the text and the different versions of the Jungle Book, it is mentioned that they were the creator of the jungle.
No, would you say that this is completely anglicization?
Which
Hathi
one?
is Colonel Hathi.